Welcome everybody to Legal Tech Week for July 28th, 2023. This is the show where we talk about the top stories in legal tech and innovation from the past week or so. And I'm Bob Ambrogi. I write the blog Law Sites and also have the podcast Law Next. And we're going to have a guest speaker in just a moment. But first, let's go around and introduce today's panelists. And since Jeff Brandt, you're a guest sitting in today, well, let me have you go first.
Hi, everybody. I am Jeff Brandt. My day job is the CIO at the law firm of Jackson Kelly. I am also the editor of the Dan Hauck Law Technology Digest. And I guess in deference to our guest speaker today, I should also add that I am the strategic partner liaison at ILTA for NetDocuments. So thank you for having me. Looking forward to the conversations today.
Yeah. So you have a day job and you have Dan Hauck. Is Dan Hauck a morning job or a late night
Dan Hauck is
job?
more of a morning job. That's the
Okay.
5 to 7, 5 to 8 job in the morning.
I always wondered when you did that. It's always so up to date. I really love your newsletter.
Thank you very much.
All right. And then going around, Jean O'Grady, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Jean O'Grady. I am the writer, editor, publisher of DeweyB Strategic, which covers knowledge management, research, and all sorts of other things. And I also write a monthly column for Legal Tech Hub. And it's great being back as a subscriber to Dan Hauck. It had dropped off for a while.
It did. Blasphemy.
I know.
All right, Niki.
Hi all, my name is Niki Black. I am the head of SME and external education at My Case and LawPay. And I write legal tech columns for the ABA Journal, Above the Law, the Daily Record. And I also oversee the benchmark and legal industry reports and author those for the My Case and LawPay team as well. Glad to be here.
And last but not least for today, anyway, Stephanie.
Hi, I always hate following Niki because my intro is so short. I'm Stephanie Wilkins, editor-in-chief of Legal Tech News at ALM.
All right. And so Joe Patrice is away, Steve Embry's away, Victor Lee's away, Caroline Hill is away today. So
She's at a drink party again.
Did she say that? I missed it.
No, but she always says that.
She always says that.
It's Friday night there. She's
Well, it
always
is Friday night
Sorry.
in the UK.
It's already.
So
It's
she has
Miller
better
time in
things to do
London.
than hang out with us.
Oh.
I don't know what, but anyway. All right. Well, so we have a guest speaker today on for the first part of the program. Probably one of the top stories we all covered this week was NetDocuments' rollout of ndMAX. It's a series of generative AI products that it unveiled the first of this week, and we'll be putting out additional ones in the coming down the pike. And so we've got Dan Hauck, who's the Chief Product Officer at NetDocuments, with us today to tell us a little bit about what they've done and take any questions or comments that people may have about it. So Dan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm in very esteemed company. It's awesome to be here. Really obviously delighted to talk and share, if it's okay, a little bit about what we did with ndMAX.
Yeah, I was going to say, why don't you just first tell us a little bit about yourself and then go into that. For people who don't know you, everybody knows you, but maybe.
So yeah, great. Again, to be here. My name is Dan Hauck. I'm the Chief Product Officer at NetDocuments. I was a lawyer in a past life. I was at Bryan Cave. I did complex litigation, antitrust litigation, a lot of fun things before making that pivot into legal technology, and started a company and called ThreadKM that was actually ILTA award-winning company, and then was acquired in end of 2017 by NetDocuments, and have been part of the journey of kind of the growth and building new products, bringing on a ton of new customers, and it's been a lot of fun. And I would say though that this is probably, with ndMAX, is probably the most exciting product that we've brought to market, and that's probably reflected in the feedback that we've gotten so far.
Great. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is and then see if anybody has any comments on it.
Yeah, sure. So, like, I mean, you summed it up well. It is our suite of generative AI capabilities that we've added into the platform. And I think what I would say probably the most important thing is, before we brought anything to market, we spent a ton of time talking to customers about, what they were interested in, what were the types of scenarios they were kind of focused on from a generative AI standpoint, but also a lot of like what their concerns were. What are the things that were kind of keeping them up at night? And what were some of the ideas that they had to maybe deal with the implementation? And what was interesting was a couple things. I think one, a lot of people were very keen to have us as their document management provider offer a generative AI solution, because they recognize that all of their kind of ideas, their experience, their wisdom, it's all in their documents that they generate for clients. And it's also very proprietary. It's not the kind of thing that you can get just out of GPT or a large language model. It really comes from being able to take that, bring it together with an LLM, and then get outputs that are really relevant to your client. And so that was a big ask, was to say, like, hey, how can you be part of that workflow? But then the other piece of it is that kind of responsible AI piece of it, to say, hey, we're really concerned though that as part of that process, we don't want to sacrifice or give away all of our proprietary experience and wisdom that we accrue and that we deliver as value to our clients. And so I think they were really happy to see us putting responsible AI at the center of our approach. And we worked with Microsoft on that quite a bit. Which I could talk more about, but ultimately we saw that ability to bring in that expertise as a key part of this. And then with the first product that we have released under the ndMAX suite is Pattern Builder Max. And we just saw that as like the ultimate way to empower users with all of the capabilities of generative AI, so that they can actually just build their own apps using a no-code style workflow. Because we know that our customers, they do all sorts of different things. There's immigration attorneys and IP attorneys and litigators and transactional attorneys. And so, to have a platform where you can really kind of tailor apps to the type of work that you do is really powerful. And so, yeah, we did a media briefing. I think a number of you were on there. Thanks for being there. And I think that was really cool because you got to see one of our customers, Greg Siskin, who is an immigration attorney, who really showed what a complex real-world generative AI app looks like, and how powerful it is when you can start doing things like chaining prompts together, giving really explicit prompt design into the question to get the kind of tailored and well-crafted responses that you would want to get out of it. And so, yeah, we've gotten a lot of feedback and interest and folks who are reaching out to us saying that they want to get involved.
Yeah, I thought, as you said, a bunch of us were on that media briefing that you did, and to me that demo that Greg Siskin did really kind of blew me away. I thought that was really cool. I chose to kind of start my write-up about this with that because it's Pattern Builder was already a pretty cool document automation software, but the capability that this brings into it to customize and to synthesize, I think, information and create output from that was really pretty dramatic, I thought. Are you able to talk at all about some of the other I don't know if you call them product skills, whatever you want to call them at this point, that might be coming down the pike here using this ndMAX?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually been working, a lot of the early customers who we've been working with they're kind of, we're foundationally building a set of kind of common applications that we see, a lot of applicability inside of law firms. And so things like summarizing a deposition, which you've seen, but also things like, doing extraction of data, of, contract data, of data in pleadings and that sort of thing. I think one of the things that, we've also added into the platform that a lot of people might not realize is the ability to store complex data inside of NetDocuments and secure it, associate it with a matter. So it's not just about like, hey, this is a place to store your documents, but you can also build out really rich data capabilities. And so as you start, having a skill or an app where you want to extract a bunch of content from a contract, for example, that can flow straight into a data table, which then you can use to power any number of automations out of that. And so those kind of extraction capabilities are some examples of apps that we're building. Also being able to do things like creating timelines, those types of things. And what we're doing is kind of putting all of these, interrogating documents with Q&A, that type of thing. What we're doing is actually taking all of those, different types of applications and putting them into what we call the ndMAX Studio. And that is a place where we not only kind of give you the app so that you can put it directly into your repository and just start running with it, but we also explain how the app was built and some of the kind of logic that goes into drafting a really smart prompt that does the things that you want to do, and then maybe some areas of customization that you might make for your own firm. And those are the types of skills that we want to really, share with people so that as they're starting to develop their prompt engineering skills and utilization of generative AI, we're helping them along that path. And so what we're finding actually in talking with some firms is they're actually using these studio apps and showing them to lawyers in their firm to give them ideas about, okay, this is awesome, but then could we do this and could we do that? And then they can start to iterate on those apps or build something completely new.
If anybody in the chat has questions or comments, well, a lot of comments going through in the chat. If anybody has any questions specifically for Dan, go ahead and drop them in there. But let me just turn to the panelists and see if any of you have any comments or questions for Dan.
I'll start out. I'm sorry, go ahead, Gene.
No, well, my question is pretty simple. I actually find a lot of lawyers don't want to customize things themselves. So I wonder, do you have a sense of what percentage of your customer base actually wants to get that deep? Or do you think firms are just going to end up hiring specialists to do the customizations? Because I just wanted, what are you hearing from the market?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I respond to it a couple ways. First, there's not everybody's like Greg who's going to build out a really sophisticated app, and so that's definitely one of the driving reasons of why we have the studio apps, which are just out of the box and ready to go. And for most people, we expect that a lot of folks will use those and probably just use them like that and never end up touching them. But also a lot of the larger firms that we're working with, they have, kind of AI dedicated teams now who are really focused on what are the applications that we can use. And the cool thing is they don't have to be developers because the prompts are just written in normal English language. And so it's actually very easy for, folks who are non-technical, non-developers to help inform and actually draft some of the applications that are used. And so what we're seeing is kind of this coming together of those resources inside the firm to be able to build the apps and test them out and then, start using them in practice. But I think you also hit on a great point, Gene, about the partners as well. NetDocuments, we've got a very strong partner network. They've been helping a lot of our customers also get on board with Pattern Builder before we had Pattern Builder Max. And we think that there's great opportunity for partners to help onboard customers as well as they want to do that kind of fine tuning and customization.
Jeff, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so one of the things we were talking about before the call started, I'm super impressed with, if you want to call it the concessions, the things that Microsoft is willing to do to work with NetDocs. And to a certain point, Dan, it goes to a question in the chat in terms of how keeping the data inside the NetDocs platform. A lot of things people don't consider with large language models and different pieces is not only how everything your prompt and the answers and everything else, the data you're feeding into it sometimes feeds back into that learning model, But I won't steal the thunder, but tell everybody some of the concessions that you've gotten from, again, I won't call them concessions, the agreements with Microsoft that you all have, which I think is unprecedented and really a plus for NetDocs.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. I think you're right. It's very important to recognize that, you know, with a lot of applications like a Chat GPT or so forth, when you put something in there, you know, it can go, in fact, feed into the large language model. So if you're putting sensitive client information, if you're putting in kind of your own proprietary methodologies for, you know, how you draft documents or that type of thing, you know, that could, you know, that finds its way back in, right? And so again, kind of talking with customers, we knew that was a real concern. So, you know, we have a great and longstanding partnership with Microsoft. And so we started working with them very early on. Yeah, and to reiterate, this actually runs on Microsoft OpenAI, so Azure Cognitive Services. And so, you know, as part of, you know, our relationship with them, we started expressing, you know, these concerns and saying, you know, we can't really have, you know, prompts get scrubbed for explicit content or obscene content and so forth, because that's exactly the type of thing that can come up in the delivery of legal services, as well as we can't have, you know, it being fed into the large language model, because that's going to erode the, you know, competitive advantages that our customers and law firms expect. And so, you know, they gave us the exemptions that we needed so that, you know, any data that gets sent to OpenAI as part of getting the response back is purged. Both the input is purged and the output is purged. So it never feeds into that large language model. So our customers never have to worry that they're giving away client information or their own information. And then also, you know, even in the case that it has, you know, obscene or sensitive content in it, there, you know, we got another exception from Microsoft so that it doesn't, even though it doesn't get flagged and then reviewed by a human reviewer, which is kind of the normal practice. And so that doesn't happen. And so our customers kind of have real assurance that, you know, that they can maintain that privacy. It was interesting, kind of before we had, you know, those exemptions in place when we were doing initial testing, you know, I was testing a deposition and with the deposition summarized and was not getting a response back. And it was because it was I didn't realize there was some foul language in it that was getting flagged. And so, you know, that won't happen with customers who are in production now.
I think that's a huge piece for the responsible pieces of AI. I think that's a huge plus, and kudos to NetDocs for getting that.
Yep. Anybody else on the panel have a question? There's several questions in the chat, but I just want to check. Stephanie or Niki, did you have anything?
I mean, not a question. I was on the demo and it looked great. I just wanted to say that we just got a lot of great positive response from our readers about it. So good job.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, one of the questions, one of the questions in the chat was just whether Pattern Builder Max is from Mark Lauritsen might be available for law school app building courses like After Pattern once was.
Yeah, I love it. You know, I think that's an area where we would love to have a conversation. So I would say reach out to our team. And, you know, I would say that this in particular would lend itself to that kind of environment. And, you know, and so like, let's have a conversation.
Okay. And somebody else was, I think it was Sarah Glassman was asking about, is there a public demo where somebody could see Greg Suskin's app, or is that in the requested demo link?
I believe it might be in the requested demo link, and try and follow up on that. You know, I think one thing that I would call out is that, you know, he was very kind and gracious enough to be able to share it, and we didn't share his whole demo because, again, that's kind of his, you know, secret sauce that he's developed a little bit. We only showed the first part of it, but it actually, there were several pages of, you know, building. For those who don't know, this was a immigration 01A application, I believe, which is essentially a special type of visa that you can apply for. And what it did is it took recommendation letters, and then it extracted out a lot of that information and used it to generate a cover letter and really other pieces of the application. And I think the reason it's such a powerful example is because it's not just what I think a lot of us have done before, which is kind of go into GPT and say, you know, draft me a lease or draft me a demand letter or something like that. And it's very simple. It gives you something. this is something that is very complex. And Pattern Builder Max allowed Greg to chain different prompts together and work with a bigger document set and embed those into the prompts to get to exactly, what he was looking for. And so, we definitely have some of those more complex examples that we'll share as part of a demo as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we all do in practicing law. There's sort of having to pull together bits and pieces of unique content from different sources and synthesize it in a cohesive way that it's just not. I mean, it's not easily a direct Chat GPT task as it is right now, and I thought that was really cool. I mean, you could just, if nothing else, the time savings in doing that it just seemed really dramatic. Somebody else is asking, how would you compare what you're doing to co-counsel from Case Text? And they mentioned that Greg Siskin is also working with Case Text too, and as Gene mentioned, helped get them on Morning Joe. So are you going to be on Morning Joe, and how do you compare?
Waiting for the call. No,
this is better. A lot more people watch this.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a lot. I would just say that there's probably a lot of different generative AI solutions out there, and I think one of the reasons our customers, again, we actually, so it's interesting. We did when we were researching the development of a product, we did a survey, and this was a blind survey. This wasn't coming from NetDocuments specifically, but because we wanted to understand how were people thinking about the usage of generative AI. And one of the things that came through very clearly, in fact, 3 out of 4 respondents said that they want their DM provider to provide, their document management provider to provide an AI solution, because really, I think the best examples of how generative AI can really accelerate a legal practice kind of come from that corpus of documents that sit in the document management system. It's using your past work to help you write your next work, right? It's classifying all of that content that you have. We put a lot of things into the document management system, and assistance in classifying that is really valuable, and then searching back through it. So what you're going to see, and the ndMAX designed to introduce these capabilities into the NetDocuments platform. But we started with Pattern Builder Max because I think what's so special about that one is just the absolute flexibility that it has, and I think that's where a lot of firms are seeing real differentiation between other products, is they can really build something exactly the way that they want. They don't have to wait for the vendor to kind of solve for their problem, right?
Yeah, I wonder if it's a little bit more as opposed to co-counsel. I wonder if maybe Harvey's a little bit closer, in the sense that Harvey is being deployed out against law firms' own existing content, their own document management systems in some ways. Although none of us are seeing much of Harvey, I don't think, in terms of demos or whatever else these days. But it in some ways that might come a little bit closer to what you're doing. So somebody else is asking. I think we'll probably do maybe one more question here and let you go, Dan. But does the product have hidden prompts between the user's prompt? What goes to the engine, for example? Is there a temperature setting behind the scenes, or are results repeatable?
Yeah, no, great question. So again, our thesis and philosophy is we want to completely empower our customers as they're designing it, so that they do have those control and can get to repeatable results. And so we actually expose all of the different endpoints that would go into, or that you might be able to set directly on OpenAI. So for instance, they mentioned the temperature control, so you can pick the model as an example. So we have GPT 3.5 Turbo, which is obviously not as advanced as 4, but it's really fast and it's a lot cheaper, and then you've got GPT 4 8K, and then we actually have 32K as well. So you can pick which model you want. You can pick kind of some of the variables about the token response length, but that temperature one is also one you can set. I would just say we find the best results with the temperature at 0, and that's what we recommend, because then it's the kind of the most dialed in and the most consistent.
Great. Well, I assume you'll be at ILTA next month and talking about this there. And Jeff, I'm sure you'll be there as well as will a few others of us. And,
Yes,
I won't be there this
definitely.
year.
You don't. Sorry, Jeff.
I said, actually, this year I will not be there.
oh, you're not. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
one of the few that I've missed in 40 years.
All right. Well, Dan, really appreciate your coming on and sharing this information with us. It looks like a really cool product. And I'm sure, as I say, people who want to learn more about it can, if I can speak for you, can reach out to you and find out more.
Yeah, that would be great. And definitely we'll be at ILTA. We'll be having ndMAX studio sessions where people can kind of see firsthand. We'll do some building together. Be a lot of fun. So look forward to seeing folks there.
Good. All right. Well, feel free to excuse yourself at this point. And again, thanks for taking the time to do this today.
Thank you.
Yeah. I was thinking as Dan was talking about the fact that I think actually Jeff even alluded to this in the chat, but Gene, we were talking about prompt engineering, and you had been previously on this show talking about prompt engineering, and you had another story this week that relates to that. I mean, maybe it's a good time to mention that right now.
Sure. Someone brought to my attention that now I'm going to forget it. Anthropic, which I understand is a company built by people who left OpenAI, is advertising for a prompt engineer / librarian, and they are paying that person an extraordinary amount of money. So I put it on my blog because I have actually, it's been my feeling that librarians have all the natural skills for prompt engineering because they understand how to match users with information needs, how to understand the limits of information, how to craft good searches. So, I mean, I just thought it was all there. And then whammo, a company actually was doing something I thought was time for. So I was really pleased to see that. So I will put my post in case anybody's interested in applying for a job that starts at $250,000. I will put my blog post in the chat.
How quickly can I become a prompt engineer?
I know.
Well, and this is the point where we can all trash Joe and Above the Law since he's not here, but they had that survey that came out right before AALL that they did with Wolters Kluwer, talking about the fact that generative AI is going to put librarians out of business and out of work. And I think certainly that the mood at AALL was anything but supportive of that. I think Ed Walters posted something today also talking about that point and how it's absolutely not true.
Yeah, that was I know I missed last week, but my takeaway article from AALL was, these rumors of the deaths of KM by AI are greatly overstated, or whatever the Mark Twain quote is,
Yeah. That's right. You weren't here last week. Is there anything else you wanted to say? You missed our whole conversation about AALL. What did you think of it?
I'm sure you covered it. No, the thing I enjoyed, and this will surprise nobody, if you've ever met a librarian, is how many questions people asked at the sessions, which, I actually mean that sincerely. I really love that because, the speakers are great, but you sort of start hearing the same things over and over again on the circuit. And to me, it's really the questions that people ask that are informative about what people want to know and take the conversations in a different direction. So I appreciated that part of it. And overall, I just thought it was a good conference, and knowledge management is not dead.
I just wanted to add one comment. I was thinking about the exhibit hall, and I almost had the sense, how like they say right before a tsunami, the water recedes and everything is peaceful. And that's my recollection of the exhibit hall. Like nobody had anything to show this year, but it's like within the next 12 months that the deck is going to be cleared and we're going to be looking at completely different kinds of products.
Although in this case, the water's parted thanks to that crazy column down the middle of the exhibit hall.
Right.
Yeah, that was an awkward setup.
That was the weirdest exhibit hall. All right. Well, where do we go from here? There's probably the Niki, I have to say, your story, your ATL column this week, was it just this week that you published? This is probably the best read that I had of the week. So maybe we should go there next.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's high praise. Every once in a while, some of my best writing comes out when I'm ranting, and that's what this was, and also my daily record column that will be out next week. And in this case, what I ranted about was, the title of my article was, "This is why we can't have nice things like AI." And it's about how, one of the things I notice is patterns. When I skim through my RSS feed and I just sort of try to get patterns of like what's happening big picture and kind of dive it down into legal. And I also, with my criminal defense background, also am very interested in civil rights violations and that type of thing. And so what I'm noticing with AI, and this is the AI really that preceded generative AI, like traditional AI, and the way that we as humans have been applying this across the board to our people, to other people within our midst, oftentimes the government. And what's happening is that it just strikes me as if Black Mirror and all these like dystopian realities are all coming to fruition immediately, like right as this crazy potent generative AI is being unleashed upon us all. And it just does not bode well for where we're going, And so what some of the themes that I saw that I talk about in my article is, it's almost like the government took 1984 and instead of using it as like a warning, they've decided that this is the playbook that they're going to work from. And so, some of the examples I talk about is, I read this week about a Pentagon-funded study that used AI to detect violations of social norms based on text sent by users. So just trying to apparently parse through all the data of text. I'm not exactly sure how they're getting these texts other than the NSA program that we're all familiar with, probably that way, even though it's not supposed to apply to US citizens. But, they're trying to locate antisocial behavior, which reminds me very much of like China's social credit system or that Black Mirror episode Nosedive. And then, there was another story about how cops are using AI to watch millions of cars to predict whether you might be a criminal based on suspicious patterns of behavior. So yet another example of just using AI in the worst possible way. And then across the pond in Britain, they've got, they're using AI to ban people from grocery stores based upon matches with suspected or actual shoplifters. And we all know how problematic AI is and how biased it is in terms of facial recognition and its ability to recognize anything but white male faces. It really does not do a good job with that. And so I saw this pattern of, all right, we're trying to ban people who are stealing from grocery stores, presumably economically disadvantaged people. We're using AI to track subway fare evasion. We talked about this, I think, last week in New York City. Again, you're going after economically disadvantaged people that can't afford a subway fare. And one person pointed out in the chat last week, we don't criminalize parking tickets, which is what people that can afford cars are getting, but we criminalize people trying to use public transportation but can't afford to. With criminal behavior. And then again, there was another example of public housing residents across the US are being unfairly targeted and punished for trivial offenses based on faulty information obtained using facial recognition software. So again, it only applies to economically disadvantaged people living in public housing. And one example in this article was how a single mother in Massachusetts was improperly evicted based upon conclusions reached using the software, that she was having overnight guests too often when she was taking night classes. And the overnight guest was I think it was her ex-boyfriend who was babysitting her kids, or possibly the kid's father. So this person would come while she went to class and then leave when she got back, but they were flagging it as having him overnight too often in violation of the rules. And then even for those who are not economically disadvantaged, and the last example that I included in my article was US Senator faced delays at the airport because of TSA's facial recognition system that they've been put into place that I've encountered at some of the airports, where it's voluntary. And yet they tell you if you don't participate, you're probably going to face delays. So how voluntary is it if you're rushed and you're trying to get to your plane? So I just thought it was a if this is what we're doing with AI, which is already a really strong force that preceded the generative AI, I foresee a very quick devolution, if that's a word. Did I make that up?
No, it's a word.
of our culture and where we're going. And I think that all the sci-fi shows that I've watched over the years, you know, may very well have predicted where we're going, and it's a little depressing. So that's what I wrote about this week.
Yeah, I thought it was very depressing. I mean, it's stuff we all know. We sort of know some of this stuff already. I mean, we know we're getting our license plates scanned, you know, when we go through toll booths and stuff like that. But the just the license plate article alone was enough to totally freak me out. I mean, the example they gave was this guy they pulled over. Why? Because he kept driving from Massachusetts to New York. Now, I used to drive from Massachusetts to New York every single week because I worked in New York and lived in Massachusetts. I would be apparently, you know, conducting suspicious activity, not to mention who runs drugs from Massachusetts to New York. I didn't even get that part of it. But it is really frightening if you think about, you know, they are able to document it. This is like the old 24 episodes when they could just kind of walk into this computer console and pull up, you know, information on exactly where everybody was at every given moment, and video and everything else. It's just really, really scary. It's impossible to disappear anymore.
Except I watch all those wonderful detective shows where all of the AI helps them find children who have been stolen and traffickers. So I don't know. I think there's a balance.
Well, I mean, I think that's always it, where, I mean, unfortunately, this is to be expected because every time we have a nice thing, it also is a bad thing, or the bad guys get it. So that's always the balance, not to diminish the badness of it. But yeah, I mean, exactly. That's why we can't have nice things. But like you said, I mean, we're being seen everywhere. Like, so how would you all feel if, you know, you started going to conferences or concerts or whatever, and you knew they were facial recognitioning you?
They are.
Well, I know, but I mean, more and more places will start doing it. Like, is there?
Well, there was
like
an
you said,
article
yeah,
a couple of months ago about a law firm whose lawyers got
Right,
facially recognized because they were tangentially involved in
Yeah.
a case. And
Yeah.
so they kicked them out of I think it was a casino as part of that. I mean,
Oh,
Niki,
yeah.
Madison Square Garden,
your
was it?
your
Something
article
like
for me was really the babysitter thing and the night classes thing. I was thinking to myself going, geez, so we've got, yes, this first generation of AI tools, which again, a tool could be used for good or for bad. And there's a lot of bad being used. And then you've got generative AI, and you're now to the point where you can't trust what you see, what you hear, you know, all those different pieces. And so, you know, it's tough enough as is. And the downside for this is going to be when it's used for bad, it's going to be a lot worse because you're not going to be able to trust anything. So even when something comes out written by a human, you're not going to be able to necessarily trust it. OpenAI even dropped their inspector detector tool because it's so bad at detecting AI written text.
yeah.
And this is only the fourth generation of generative AI.
Yeah. And the incident you mentioned with Madison Square Garden, and I think we all sort of, so when you go to a massive place like that, there might be things going on, but it's going to become more and more common, and it's going to cross the line. And like Niki said, you know, there's probably going to be, everywhere you go, anywhere you buy a ticket, there's probably going to be a small line item. And like, I'm not even talking about major conference, like a tiny art gallery or something, you know, something in your ticket that says you've agreed to, like, whatever wording to agree with the biometric statutes in the state that you're being recorded. And so, I mean, I feel like people would be like, oh, I don't want to go if they're going to be facial recognitioning. That's not a word, me. But I don't know that there's a way around it unless you just don't go anywhere.
And don't pay for anything, and don't make any calls, and
Yeah.
don't text anybody, and don't carry a mobile phone around with you because it's pinging even when it's off. And
Don't drive in a
it's-
modern car.
don't drive.
We're all going to become Amish. You know, they have the answer.
Well, and that's why, you know, you mentioned, Jean, about working your way through some detective shows. I have, as of late, started with Law and Order SVU season 1. And I've worked my way through the entire series that's available up to season 23. And what's been fascinating about that is the advances in the way that they can use technology And that show, the reason I like Law and Order is it very does closely parallel and is pretty accurate when it comes to criminal defense and what happens in the courts and prosecutions, and the law is correct. I don't get pissed off when I watch the court scenes usually because it's pretty accurate. They've got good consultants, but it's fascinating how much they're using this tech now, and how it's evolved over the years. And it's, the facial recognition technology is unbelievable, but it's also unbelievably bad. They've got these, and we are getting tracked everywhere we go. That's what was very interesting about the show more recently in the later episodes is, they can check everything, and they've got the AI to take all that data and analyze it quickly, whether it's your spending, whether it's traffic cameras catching you, whether it's then they have to go get the private cameras, surveillance cameras from all the people up and down, but they can literally just track you everywhere that you go because of these things, especially in a city like New York City. But the cameras are of varying qualities, and the surveillance cameras are often really crappy, and so they're trying to use facial recognition once they do get one of those images using this grainy surveillance photo. And oftentimes the facial recognition is horrible with high quality, images. So it's alarming how much we're tracked already. And, you just walk down the street, you're not consenting, but private stores have cameras up all over the place. And so we are 100% tracked at this point, and it is terrifying. And even in New York State, my last example, I didn't get Easy Pass forever because I didn't want the government to track me on that, I don't know, the few times I used the throughway, thinking criminal defense attorney, if I commit a felony, I don't want them to know where I'm going. Not that I'm committing felonies, but it's the idea that the government can track me. And now they've gotten rid of the toll booths. And so either you constantly are getting these bills in the mail from your license plate getting scanned, or else I just gave in and I signed up for Easy Pass. So, at this point,
In
I feel like I totally gave
2021
in to the man.
or 2023, it took you that long?
Took me that long, yeah.
I've been going for 15 years.
All right. Well, talking about what AI can detect or not, there were a couple of stories this week about law schools limiting or not limiting the ability of applicants to use AI. Stephanie, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I know Joe wrote about the University of Michigan came out first and said, for personal statements for law school admissions, we're not allowed to use it. And then since then, ASU came out and said, yeah, we're all for it. Actually, that was written by Christine Charnosky, the education reporter who I got in their audience today to listen to us, because I told her we'd be talking about this. They've sort of come forward and said, yeah, we're all about it. We embrace technology, we embrace the future. And I think it's just, I think it's a silly debate to be having, because it's another one of those, you can't put the genie back in the bottle thing. Like, how are you actually going to know? Like, we've just established that the AI detectors are garbage. How are you going to know if law students used it? And yes, they sign a thing saying, I swear I did not. But going forward, this technology is going to be there. Trying to ban it in these discrete little ways, to me, just makes no sense. People keep trying to do it, and it's, I don't know. I'm frustrated with it. I thought by now we kind of had been past that. So I was surprised to see it out of a, top 14 law school.
It's not new stuff, though. I mean, it's just whatever the technology of the day is. I can remember in high school, calculators got banned, right? Because you're supposed to have those skills, build those skill sets. Yeah, well, that's a little before my time, but calculators, you had to learn to do that skill set yourself. And I see it in my own kids that, things that I think are things that people should know. Now that's probably more the internet as opposed to AI. Just people don't put those things into their brains anymore. But yeah, the banning of technology, and to your point, Stephanie, that goes back to Niki's point, which is even as bad as the detectors are, people are going to use them, and so people are going to get canned or penalized for false positives. And it's the dog chasing its tail in terms of trying to get something that's going to detect AI, and it, so fine, it detects it for 2 months, if that, and then the next generation or the language model improves to the point where it's now undetectable again. And there's all kinds of biases in there where English as a second language gets flagged more often than English as your primary or first language. So there's lots of things there that, again, for good or for bad, going to end up being more on the bad side.
I mentioned that I had a second rant in my article that I had just submitted, which was this exact issue, which is why I had included this as mine too, because I got my articles confused and I thought that's what I was going to be talking about. And I just found this particular case, but I ranted about this very thing, which is in my Daily Record article, which is this idea that every time there is a new technology, there's this knee-jerk reaction in our industry, whether it's the courts, whether it's the law schools, whether it's the ethics committees, where they're like, oh, no, you can't use it. Okay, fine, you can use it, but you need client consent. Eventually they're like, oh, we give up, just use it. Just keep these things in mind when you use it. And it's frustrating to see this happen over, it happened with email, it happened with computers before that, cloud computing, it absolutely happened. And now we're seeing it with AI, you have to certify that you used it. Whereas, they did this with online research too, like books versus online research. You have to certify you used it. You have to certify you didn't use it. You have to and eventually everyone's going to be using this. I think we're going to get to that point in a matter of months, and it's not even going to matter anymore. So it's like they're making having all these stupid knee-jerk reactions that are going to be moot within a few months, honestly, way quicker than before.
And in terms of, just positioning, how much better does ASU look than University of Michigan right now? You have ASU's dean saying things like, we're driven by innovation. We want to teach our students ethical responsibilities about emerging technologies and enhance their education because that's what they're using going forward. And then you have University of Michigan being like, womp womp, we don't trust you, don't use the robot. Like, what?
And just the reasonableness of the way that Arizona presented it. They say, look, we know applicants are using a lot of tools when they put together their applications. This is just one of them. I mean, it's the Michigan policy is essentially in denial about that fact. I mean, they say they want to be able to evaluate students' writing, but as Joe points out in his piece, students spend a long time writing these. It's not a natural writing process. They have coaches, they have helps, they have friends read them. It's not really reflective of what their writing individually is going to look like. So why not take a rational approach and reflect and recognize that this is just one of many tools students will be using?
What if they plop it into an AI-powered Grammarly? Like, is that bad? I don't know. Yeah,
That's an
Exactly.
add-on.
To Google, to turn it off if you're working in Google Docs, you have to shut Grammarly off if you have it added on. I mean, that's ridiculous. I agree.
Yeah.
And
It all comes down to, again, the responsible use. If you're going to, throw in a prompt and let it generate something and that's the end of your involvement, then you deserve whatever comes down the line in terms of your submission of that document, whether it's to law school, whether it's to the judge or whatever. You have to use a tool responsibly. And like anything else, if Excel, every 105 calculations decided that 1 + 1 was 3, you'd spend a whole lot more attention as to what your spreadsheet was doing. That same courtesy does not seem to be given to generative AI tools.
well, and along the lines of schools doing the right thing, I included in my article, and I think it was from a Legal Tech News article from January. It was a research and writing professor in a law school saying, I'm talking to my students about how to use it. That's part of our course now. And that's the appropriate response. Teach them how to use it properly, teach them how to ensure they're not plagiarizing, and that they're using it just to assist, not to replace their writing skills. And that's the right approach. And over time, I think we're going to see more of that.
Which is why, and Harvard Law just this week, or was it last week? I don't remember I don't know if you talked about it last week, had that initiative come out with their internet. I don't have the article in front of me. They're starting a whole new program at Harvard Law about AI and using these tools and the responsible use of them, because anyone who knows where this is going, that's how it has to be. And Joe kind of touched on this a little bit, probably more strongly than I would say it, shockingly. But if whoever is applying to you is dumb enough to just use this tool and give you something that's so obviously written by AI or hallucinating or like whatever, they shouldn't be getting into your law school. Like, ideally, these law students are smart enough to take whatever they get out of it and use it and massage it and work with it. So, I don't even know what you think this rule is going to prevent.
Well, it's funny. I was on an American Association of Law Schools panel a couple of years ago about teaching technology in law school. And one of my takeaways from that program was that since law professors are tenured, they don't suffer any consequences from being completely ignorant of what is happening in technology, and they don't really have incentives to stay on top of technology. They can stay teaching the same course they were teaching 20 years ago, and they don't have to integrate new technologies. And so in some ways, the entire structure of education incentivizes inertia.
Yeah,
I want to throw out here a quote Stephanie made me think of. There was an article recently about Dunning-Kruger effect. And John Cleese has what I think is the world's best quote about this. And it basically goes, if you are really, really stupid, that it's impossible for you to know you are really, really stupid. And so I think that applies in a lot of things here associated with how AI gets treated. And sometimes I think.
Well, that's
Yeah,
I was just going to say, it's the old, you don't know what you don't know.
right. Yeah, I think I mentioned before, but I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago put on by Aspen Publishing of all law school faculty and deans, and haven't had a chance to write up my impressions from that yet. And we were under a kind of an agreement where I can't, so that people could speak frankly, I can't actually mention names or specifically quote anybody from the conference, but I can talk impressionistically. But there was just a lot of conversation there about generative AI. Not surprisingly, it wasn't a tech-focused conference necessarily, more focused on innovation and law teaching. But the faculty are, a lot of faculty are still struggling with this issue of how to teach around this and what kinds of restrictions or guardrails they should be putting in place around their students' use of GPT. I mean, I think the overwhelming sentiment among those who were there was, again, you can't put the toothpaste in the tube, and we should just allow students to use it, but it would be good to have ways to figure out when they're using it or know when they're using it and have ways of looking at that. One of the ideas that was kind of talked about was trying to come up with maybe more creative kinds of writing assignments where, if you're asking somebody to write something in a particularly creative way, they might not be able to just generate something using Chat GPT because it may not reflect the kind of creativity you're asking for. So even if they create a sort of a draft with Chat GPT, maybe you can craft it in a way that it would be something they would at least have to edit and revise and configure themselves. But anyway.
Yeah, one of the initial first reactions when New York City public schools started banning it and things like that I thought was really interesting is there were certain college professors who stepped up and said, we know our students are going to use this, so instead we're going to turn the tables on them. We're going to use it to write something and either make sure it has errors in it or make sure it's poorly written or whatever, and use that and then give it to them and be like, how would you change this? And that way it would everyone's would be different. They could all pump it back into Chat GPT and get the same answer, but that, just fine, we'll take it, we'll use it as our baseline and make you move from there then, which I actually think is really smart, because if we see this in more and more tools, particularly in law, that's how it's going to go. Learn how to use it as your baseline and then go from there and build off of it. The training and the skill sets are just going to have to be different.
Right. Jeff, I know you were a late recruit to today's show, and I didn't know if was there anything in particular you wanted to talk about today? Any stories at the top of your radar?
No, I think we've talked about the ones that I had potentially on my radar, so I'm good.
All right. One of the stories, well, I guess maybe sticking with the Chat GPT theme, because that's all we talk about these days. Gene, I thought you had an interesting story that was actually on law.com, but you highlighted on the whole issue of lawyers using Chat GPT for legal research and one of the things that may be motivating them to do that. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like my two favorite subjects. Lawyers who use Chat GDP instead of knowing how to do research, and this person who wrote the article was blaming it on the cost of Lexis and Westlaw, which, don't get me started. I mean, Lexis simultaneously took caused legal research to simultaneously take a great leap forward and a great leap backward at the same time, because they made it easier to research, and yet they tied it to the consequences of arbitrary costs. And I have been railing against this for the entire life of my blog. And honest to God, I have had, and thankfully, well, first of all, the person who wrote the article didn't talk to any law librarians. They only talked for some reason, they talked to e-discovery specialists and
Well, I can tell you
Complain to their
why.
editor.
Okay.
No, yeah, totally my fault. No, because the conversation came up. It wasn't an article she was planning to write. It came up in talking to e-discovery people, and they all just started talking about this. So she just went with those. Yes.
Oh, somebody said I'm preaching. I'm sorry, but I have actually given lectures to
Preaching to the choir.
executives at both Lexis and Westlaw to just shut it down. Law firms are addicted to these ridiculous, the CFOs in law firms are addicted to the revenue that's associated with it. It is totally destructive. It's 30 years out of date. It should have been gone decades ago. And it inhibits lawyers to this day remained terrified of doing legal research because of the arbitrary costs. So, but well, at least until this summer, there were two low-cost information providers, and now we're sort of both of them, Casetext and VLEX Casetext and Fastcase have both been purchased. I assume Fastcase is going to stay a low-cost information provider that's available through most bar associations. But the other thing that occurred to me is
They'd be crazy to get rid of that.
if people are in small law firms, every small law firm ought to invest in a law librarian to keep everybody from making stupid decisions, if only for that, lower your insurance premiums, because we can help you make smart decisions about lower cost alternatives. And it doesn't have to, Lexis and Westlaw aren't the only players. Bloomberg Law came out of the gate without doing cost recovery. Okay, I'm done.
How much is Lexis and Westlaw anyway these days?
It's ridiculous.
Anyway.
Well,
To quote Warren, yeah.
Don't even, we all sign, everyone signs confidentiality agreements. You can't find out,
tell
but it's
us.
a lot. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think on that note, anybody else have anything else for the good of the order before we wrap up today? All right, then hearing none, I think that's going to do it for today. We will be back again next week. Thanks to Jeff for sitting in with us. Thanks to all of you for spending your last part of a Friday afternoon with us, and look forward to seeing you all back next week again.
Good
Good
weekend, all.
seeing everyone.
Take
Bye.
care, everybody.
Everyone have a good weekend.